Alright guys, BLM here, back with a new video, and in this video we're back with another really random Survivor topic. We're here, I'll be running through Survivor history and talking about who I think would have gotten the C Award if the C Award was distributed for that season. Or if you do not know what the C Award is, it is a really random thing to have happened in Survivor history where Grammy Award winning artist Sia, who is a massive Survivor fan, would give away money to her favorite player of every season. Of course, she has done this for Survivor Co. Wrong, Survivor Ghost Island through IOI, and Survivor 42 through 45, though in that time it has been said that she has stopped giving out the C Award. And again, through this video, I'll be running through every season that didn't have the C Award and talking about who I think Sia would have given the money to if she did give a C Award. And with that, let's just jump right into it. Let's start off with Survivor Borneo, and straight up, I have no clue who she gives it to in Survivor Borneo. I feel like this is actually one of the tougher ones on the board here. Where I did consider someone like, obviously, Rudy, who is the fan favorite just in general on that season. Someone that most people really loved. Again, I don't really see Rudy being someone that Sia adores. Though, to be fair, she did very much like the older guy archetype to where I could see it. Though I feel like some of the things Rudy says is probably not in line with something that Sia particularly likes. So again, I did not go with Rudy. I also considered Colleen, who was also a massive fan favorite. A somewhat spunky individual, though looking at who Sia has picked in recent years, I don't know if Colleen's necessarily her vibe either. And I did very much consider Gretchen as well, where I feel like Gretchen is the type of person that she would probably like, again, this more domineering alpha female figure. But again, I feel like we've seen her like that sort of figure in the past, though again, I did not pick her here either. Really, the top two contenders here for me ended up actually coming down to Jenna or Gervase. And the main reason for this is because I do think, as we've seen with Sia in recent years, I do feel like she does very much care about like the sob story of it all, very much care about who needs the money. And obviously, like, again, it's her money that she's giving away, to where, again, you would assume that she would want it to go to a place where she knows that it would help. And again, I think with Jenna, obviously she is a single mother, someone that actually missed out on getting a video from home on her season, to where I feel like she'd be sympathetic in that light. Well, Gervase is someone that literally just had a kid and got it announced while on the season. Now, I personally went with Jenna here, particularly because, again, I do think the moment of her not getting the video from her kids, and again, her also being, again, very young, single mother, I feel like that's a bit more of a sympathetic background, where, again, I feel like Jenna might be the pick, even though, again, it does very much come off as random on paper. Next, I'm going to move on to Australian Outback. And Australian Outback is another one I really don't know. I feel like this is a very difficult one, where obviously the fan favorite for this season was Colby. Yet again, I don't really see Sia being a big Colby fan. I feel like she never has seemed to love this like all-American guy, especially when they're not really the underdog figure, where again, obviously Colby was essentially an overdog the entire season, to where I don't really feel like that's sort of the archetype she really gels with. Now, I did consider someone like a Scoopin, who obviously fell in the fire, to where obviously it would not age well, but again, I do think that would at least be consideration. I also considered Kimmy, and Kimmy is obviously one that was a vegetarian, wanted to save the chickens. Again, that is something that obviously Sia is very sympathetic towards. However, that hasn't been the end all be all in many other seasons. I mean, we just saw Big Wendy in Edge of Extinction be someone that everyone thought was going to get the Sia Award, and she didn't, to where, again, I don't think that's her pick here. The person I end up going with here is Elizabeth Hasselbeck. Elizabeth was a big underdog throughout the entire season, again, was on the bottom throughout the entire end game, and does come off as a very sympathetic figure on the show. Again, had this relationship with Roger, and while obviously, like, nowadays, a bit more controversial of a figure, I feel like for back then, I feel like this is probably the person I see Sia gelling with a bit more. Next up for Africa, and this one's going to be an interesting one here, because my pick is actually a bit of a normal one in pertaining to the rest of the video moving forward, though. Really, the only true considerations that I considered here, again, like Kim Johnson is someone that maybe she would have been liking as this older woman that did well in challenges towards the end and got to the very end, though again, I did not pick her. Big Tom was a fan favorite in general for the season, though again, I don't really see Sia really gelling with Big Tom. I could see her liking T-Bird. I feel like T-Bird's also, again, older woman. Did very well in the game, though, and did not pick her. However, the person I end up going with here is the winner of the season. I did pick Ethan Zohn. And in general, I do not think Sia would ever pick a winner, where, again, we never seen her pick a winner before, and again, it just seems unnecessary, where, again, obviously, like, why is this person going out of their way to give so much of their own money to someone that just won $1 million? Again, it seems unnecessary. However, we have seen her in the past give away money to charity, and I do feel like this is a situation where I could very much see her giving money to Ethan to start his charity. Obviously, he later starts charity with his actual prize money. I feel like in this spot, I do feel like Ethan comes off very sympathetic. Obviously, the moment of him playing with the kids at the village was this really good moment. And really, again, he was this massive fan favorite, looked at as the first hero to ever win the show, and I do feel like those things, mixed in again with his talk about starting a charity, again, I think would be enough to have Sia pick Ethan in this spot. Next up for Marquesas, and I think this one's a bit easier. I do think this one's not particularly difficult. In my point of view, I do feel like, again, there are some considerations, obviously with Sepia, Sean, people that, again, faced against some prejudices while out there. I think they would be in consideration. Gina is someone I could see or potentially consider as, again, this big underdog, but again, did not go with her. The person I did pick here, I mean, it's Kathy. I think it's very easy. Kathy was a fan favorite of the season. Also perfectly fits into this archetype that we've seen her like in the past. Again, this person who overcomes adversity, has this big journey across the season, also one of the stronger players on the season, is also the robbed goddess of the season, where, again, we see her very much like these people that make it towards the end, but just come short. And I feel like Kathy, again, perfectly fits into everything Sia would like, to where, again, I think Kathy's an easy pick here. Next up for Thailand. I think Thailand's very difficult here. I mean, just in general, obviously, it's very difficult to really pick anyone from Thailand. Now, who I think would be in consideration, I mean, like, Ken was someone that, again, at the time, obviously was looked at as a big hero, this cop during 9/11, though, again, I don't really see that being someone that Sia in particular is really a massive fan of. Xian is someone I would consider, again, someone that faced against some discrimination while out there. I did not go with her. Gandia is someone that was a major consideration, obviously, from a modern perspective. Obviously, most people would be very sympathetic to what Gandia goes through. And I feel like, again, if this was based around the modern day, I feel like Gandia might be the pick, even though, to be fair, she didn't pick Kelly. Again, I just feel like the reception to Gandia at the time was just so different, in that people didn't really take this seriously and thought it was like this big character moment more so than this serious situation, where, again, did not pick Gandia. First I went with here, again, I picked Helen. I mean, this one's not really that great of a pick in the grand scheme of things. I feel like this is another one that, again, I don't feel too confident in, but it is someone that, again, fits into like kind of the archetype that Sia seems to like. I think the issue is, again, gameplay wise, she didn't really bring much to the table, but I do feel like personality wise, I feel like Helen is someone that I think she could gel with, so again, I went with her here. Next up for Amazon, and I feel like this one's kind of easy. I mean, there's not really much to truly consider here. I mean, you got, like, I don't know, Matthew, who had this like nice moment with Dan early on in the season. I feel like she can maybe like that, but again, didn't pick him. Rob Cesternino, obviously such a major character across the season, but again, I feel like he's more this villainous figure, to where I don't know if she would necessarily gel with Rob on the show, especially at the time. So again, I think at the end of the day, the person I'm going to pick here is Christy. And again, Christy, obviously first deaf player to ever play Survivor, obviously has a very sympathetic backstory, also has a very sympathetic portrayal on the show, to where, while, again, there are moments where she's portrayed a bit more negatively, I do think you still feel very sympathetic in the fact that she's, again, being bullied by the likes of Jenna and Heidi, which, again, how accurate is that? But at least in the way that the show is portrayed, I feel like Christy is someone that she would very much like in this spot, so again, I picked her. Next up for Pearl Islands, and this is super easy. Probably one of the easiest ones on the board. Person I picked here, obviously it's Rupert. I mean, again, this is the height of Rupert's popularity, and I feel like Sia would very much love Rupert. And him coming off as this very sympathetic figure that talks about being bullied when he was a kid, and obviously has this like tragic downfall on the show. Also just being such a prominent character across the season. Again, I think Rupert is just such a shoo-in for this pick here. And with that, we move on to All-Stars, where I'm gonna pick Rupert again. Now, I think there's a couple other considerations. Again, Xian, again, ends up being this big underdog towards the end. I could see her liking that. Did not go with her. And Ethan, again, has the charity by this point. Maybe she would want to give more money to that. To be fair, would not be shocked if she gives like a secondary prize to Ethan for that, in the same way that she does with someone like Joe in Edge of Extinction, of giving him money to give to charity. But here, again, I think I'll go Rupert again. I mean, I don't think anything really changes here. I think Rupert, while obviously doesn't get as big of an edit his second time around, I do still think was this massive fan favorite. Obviously, he won America's Tribal Council. So I think the momentum coming off of Pearl Islands would not have waned by this point, to where, again, I think she still picks Rupert. Next for Vanuatu, and Vanuatu I think is very difficult. I don't think there really is someone that I really see clicking with Sia on this season. Now, if Chris did not win, obviously Chris is this big underdog, wins challenges, plays a very aggressive game in the back portion, where I could see her liking that, though also it does come off very villainous, so I'm not sure. Violet and Scout, I think, come off very antagonistic throughout their runs, where I think they'll be a bit too like mean-spirited for Sia, so I did not pick them. Eliza is someone that, I mean, maybe she would like, but I don't really get the sense that that's really her forte either. Maybe Julie Berry is someone that she could potentially like, especially considering her downfall at the end and her like speech to Chris, or maybe she could go Julie, but I end up actually going here with Amy. And Amy is someone that's a bit weird, because I do think her reception from the public audience at that point was very mixed, where it wasn't necessarily like completely negative, but was certainly not really a fan favorite either. To be fair, most of this cast was not particularly liked at the time. But again, I feel like Amy does fit into this kind of like badass, domineering woman that plays the game aggressively, that again, I feel like she could potentially like. To her, while technically there's only one real example of that she gave the Sia award to, I do feel like, again, Amy kind of fits in line with someone like a Drea from 42, to where, again, I feel like I would go Amy in this spot. Next up for Palau, and I feel like this one's pretty easy. Again, I mean, you can consider someone like Ian, who has a sympathetic exit from the game, though, I mean, really, the easy answer is Stephanie. I mean, I think Stephanie obviously was a big fan favorite at the time, but also beyond that, just kind of perfectly fits into all the things that Sia seems to like. Again, the strong female figure for the show, someone that has this big underdog story. Again, I just feel like Stephanie was the very clear pick here. Next up for Guatemala, and this one's actually kind of interesting, as I'm not going to pick Stephanie this time. I do feel like Stephanie, again, she could be riding off the momentum. Obviously, Stephanie got portrayed a lot more negatively across the season, to where I did not go with her. Now, beyond that, again, I consider someone like Lydia, who I could see her kind of gelling with, even though she doesn't really get the greatest amount of screen time. Though the person I'm going to go with here, I think is pretty definitive for me. I'm going to go with Rafe. I feel like Rafe is the type of person that, again, I think she would very much like. Again, this aggressive player, one of the better players of the season, someone that she can attach to from the game lens, while also, again, I think she would attach to him from a more personal lens, where again, he comes off very sympathetic throughout a lot of his run, but then being very complex in how he struggles with the morality of the game. And I feel like these are all things that I think Sia would very much like, to where again, I do think I would go Rafe in this spot. Next for Panama, also another really easy answer. Now, again, I would consider the likes of a Terry Dietz, obviously a big underdog run, wins a lot of challenges, though as I said with someone like Colby, I don't really get the sense that that's really her sort of archetype. And while again, I think this one's a bit better in the sense that Terry again was an underdog, I still feel like again, him being this like alpha bro that again can come off a bit chauvinistic at points. I feel like that's not really her sort of vibe. And then beyond that, I also very much consider Tina Shear, where obviously Tina had lost her son before the season, and obviously that was a massive sympathetic story for her, to where I could very much see her giving Tina some money in this spot as well. However, I think in terms of her favorite, I feel like it would be Cirie. Now, I don't really have any proof for this. I tried to do some research into looking up who Sia's favorite players are outside of those that she picked for the Sia Award, and I didn't really find anything that definitive, though if I were to guess, I feel like Sia feels like the type of person that loves Cirie. And again, I feel like on her original season, her having this story that she's the one that got off the couch and played this very impressive game, I feel like this is the type of person I feel like she would very much like. So again, I feel like Cirie was very easy there. Next up for Cook Islands, I feel like this one's actually very tough. I feel like Cook Islands is actually probably one of the more difficult ones, because again, looking at the board, I'm not sure who she would really sympathize with here. Where, I mean, you do got someone like Asundra, who again was like a single parent, did not get the greatest amount of screen time, though again, when she did, she could get some good content, to where again, I could see her liking Sundra as kind of like a dark horse pick there. Again, I don't know how much she would like Parvati. I feel like that's kind of like someone that I'm a bit hazy on. I'm not sure how she would necessarily feel about her. Penner, someone that I feel like probably she would not like in this spot, to where while he was a big character, he also came very villainous, to where while I could see her liking Penner as a character moving forward in the series, I do feel like in Cook Islands in particular, probably not her favorite. So the person I went with here, again, not feeling too confident about this one, but I did go Ozzy. And as I said, again, like, I don't think these like big challenge beasts are really her sort of thing, but I do think Ozzy was just such a fan favorite at the time. I do feel like Ozzy was just, again, such a fan favorite while also being this big provider. And again, I feel like there is something to like there from Sia's perspective, to where again, I think she would go Ozzy in the spot, though I'm not really that confident in it. Next up for Fiji, and I think this one's pretty easy, to be honest. There's not really another contender on the board. I think the easy pick here is Yaman. And again, I think Yaman just perfectly fits into everything she likes. Again, having this big journey across the season, coming off very likable throughout his run, plays the game very aggressively. I feel like Yaman's kind of this like perfect thing out, and was also again a fan favorite just in general at that point, to where again, I think Yaman's just this perfect amalgamation of everything she kind of likes. So again, I think that was pretty easy. Next up for China, and China's actually very difficult as well. I do feel like China's one where I don't know who she necessarily vibes with, where and I don't know how she would feel about Courtney. I don't really get the sense that Courtney's necessarily the archetype she would fully gel with, but I don't really have proof that that isn't the case either. So again, I did not know what to do with Courtney there. Amanda is someone that, again, was fine on this season. And while I could see her liking Amanda down the road, I don't know if on this season this is really a point where she would be loving Amanda. I also consider Denise, where obviously Denise, again, had a sympathetic story. Again, lied about her job at the reunion show to gain more sympathy. Or maybe she would give the initial Sia award to Denise, though I ended up going with James here. I think James, again, another one of these like massive fan favorites at this point, came off very likable on this season, has this big downfall. I feel like those are things that she does like. Now, again, at the end of the day, I don't know how much she really gels with like him being this like big physical beast of it all, but like I feel like just in general, again, he does come off very likable, to where I do feel like she would pick him. Next for Micronesia, and Micronesia is obviously a bit of a difficult one here as well, where I think you obviously have some major considerations. I mean, Parvati, I feel like by this point she would probably like Parvati in the way that she plays, especially considering how much the edit really hyped up Parvati across the season as well, to where again, I think Parvati would be a consideration. Amanda, I think, also comes off more likable across the season, where again, by the end of it, Amanda was top 3 in America's favorite players, so again, that's something. Again, did not pick her. Also considered James once again, So again, could ride off the momentum of the previous season, though. Person I ended up going with here, I did go Cirie again. Now, again, I think Cirie, someone that, again, I just sense that Sia would very much like just in general. Mixing that the fact that Cirie just has this very tragic ending to her season here, coming off just short, has this very sympathetic final words from the game. I just feel like Cirie is the person I'm seeing her gelling with the most here. Next up for Gabon, and I think this one's kind of easy for me. Again, looking at the board, there's not really that many people I would truly consider. Maybe Maddie. Again, Maddie came off likable, I guess, and maybe, again, considering he was getting married, maybe she's like, oh, I can give you money for your wedding or something. But again, not really that deep of consideration. The person I ended up going with here is Sugar. I don't think this is particularly close. I mean, Sugar gets a very sympathetic edit on this season, also has this big journey across the season, while also coming off as one of the bigger players of the season, and obviously has this big story about the passing of her father that I feel like Sia would be very sympathetic towards. So again, I feel like Sugar's the very easy pick here. Next up for Tocantins. And Tocantins is actually pretty difficult for me. I feel like this is one that I actually don't fully know, as I feel like she would love JT. And JT is someone that I consider like just giving it to JT anyway. To where, again, looking at who Sia had previously given the awards to, she kind of likes this like good old boy sort of archetype. And considering JT, again, was like an underdog for a good chunk of the season, also came off very likable. Again, I feel like JT is a front runner here. However, that's the reason I didn't give it to him here, as I do think he would probably be the pick otherwise. But beyond that, who do I pick? The two considerations for me here end up being Taj and Sierra, as I do think inherently Taj would be the type of player that Sia would like. Taj also, again, just had a kid, had to be away from her family, has this big sympathetic moment with her and Eddie, to where, again, I think she would very much like Taj. I think the one question mark for me on whether or not she would give it to Taj is the fact that obviously Taj is already rich, or Taj doesn't need the money.
Because that I did end up going with Sierra. Again, I do feel like it's a spot where out of the people that were in contention, Sierra is the one that needed the money more, kind of, just in the fact that she wasn't rich inherently. So that's something. But again, Sierra was portrayed positively, again, got a big underdog edit. And while I do think Taj's story is one that I do see Sia relating to a bit more, I feel like Sierra is the best option of those that need the money a bit more.
Next up for Samoa. And Samoa ends up being a really weird one here. Very difficult to really dissect. Obviously, Russell was his big fan favorite. People loved Russell at the time. I don't know if Sia is the type of person that loves Russell, though. I feel like Russell comes off a bit too mean-spirited for someone like Sia. To where I think Sia does like these hyper-aggressive players, but doesn't like it when they do things malicious. I feel like of the people that we see her pick that play these hyper-aggressive games, people like a Jesse, people like a Rick Devens, I feel like those sort of people are not really the type of people that are coming off as these like overt villains on the show that are doing these mean-spirited things. Where, again, I don't know if Russell is really her sort of vibe. I also consider Brett, where obviously Brett was a big underdog, though also, who is Brett? So again, he was barely on the show, so again, I did not end up picking him. I also consider Jason, where obviously Jason has him speaking out against Ben, and I think that might be a really sympathetic moment for her, to where maybe she would consider him. But I think considering his edit kind of dies off towards the end, I do feel like I struggle to see her picking him. The person I did end up picking here ends up actually being Shambo, which might be a little bit of a shocker here. Where again, I think inherently, I think someone like a Brett, someone like a Jason seems like the type of person that she would sympathize with a bit more, though she does also seem to like these like big kooky characters. Now, the ones that she has picked that are that usually have some sort of journey around them, which Shambo doesn't really have, though. Again, Shambo was like the second most edited person on this season next to Russell, to where I think that gives her a leg up here. Or again, I went with Shambo in this spot. Next over here is villains. I think this one's very difficult. I think it's actually tough to really pick one for this season, though. Obviously, Parvati is someone that obviously had already won before. Why would she need the money now? I think that is definitely a reason to not give it to Parvati. However,
I do believe she had a good underdog run throughout the season that did make her a contender, though I did not end up ultimately picking her.
Obviously, again, Russell was the fan favorite for the season. As I said, though, I don't think she really gels with Russell. Jerry is someone I can see her kind of liking here, though not in a very overt way, to where I, again, did not pick her. Also did not pick Boston Rob, who I think by this point I could see her kind of gelling a bit more Boston Rob, where he comes off more as this like heroic figure that's anti-Russell, though did not go with him.
Well, the person I did end up picking here ends up being Rupert. I did debate this again. It was close between Rupert and Parvati. I did feel like Parvati again has probably a more interesting run on this individual season. However, I do think Rupert is someone that, again, I do think she would have liked already. But then also adding in the fact that, again, he's this like ultimate hero for the season. Also has a good underdog run at the very, very end of the season. While also, again, has the charity that would, again, I think incentivize Sia to give the money there even more, especially again on All-Star season, where I don't think she's like dying to give any of these people money, where I feel like it's a spot where, again, her giving the money to charity makes it a lot more palatable, where again, I do think Rupert is the person I'm picking here.
Next up for Nicaragua, and I think this one's kind of easy, though it shouldn't be. Where, I mean, obviously, I think she would like Fabio. I think Fabio's like kind of the sort of presence I could see her liking, especially with his underdog run, though I did not pick him. Holly is someone that, again, has this journey edit to where I could see her liking her, though I did not go with her. The person I did pick, though, is Jane. Again, Jane was fan favorite at the time. I think Jane got this very sympathetic edit. Got to talk about like her daughter and how much she's going to miss her daughter when she leaves the house, and also comes off as this big underdog throughout a lot of the run. I think it was clearly meant to be this person that you're supposed to be sympathetic towards when she gets voted out, to where, again, I think Jane is the person that I see her gelling the most with, even though, again, I would not personally pick that. Next up for Redemption Island, and this one I think is kind of easy as well. I mean, yeah, I go Matt Elrod. I feel like Matt Elrod, again, perfectly fits into kind of what Sia is looking for. And I don't know how religious Sia is, and I feel like maybe that could potentially change her view of Matt here, and how religion very much played into his overall story, though I still think, again, him being this massive underdog, voted out at the very beginning, comes back from Redemption, gets voted out again, stays on Redemption until the very end of the game. I feel like all this is stuff that I do feel like she would very much like. I did go with him in this spot. Next up for South Pacific, this one was a bit tough. I think it's close between two people here. Now, again, I did consider someone like Brandon Hance. I feel like I could see her being very sympathetic towards Brandon Hance and how he goes out, though I did not go with him. Dawn is someone that, again, I think has a very sympathetic story, has the kind of need for the money, though I did not go with her. Again, the top two for me here end up being obviously Cochran and Ozzy. They were the top two in fan favorite, and I think this is a bit of a tough one for me. I did end up actually going with Cochran, though. I feel like Cochran, again, feels like a type of character she would very much like. Again, this kind of underdog figure, someone that, again, was kind of being ostracized from his tribe, and does come off very likable throughout most of his run, to where, again, I think she would go with him over Ozzy, to where, while, again, I think Ozzy also has a very good run on this season, I could very much see her liking Ozzy here, and him being this underdog on the Redemption Island, comes back at the very end of the game, loses at the last second. I feel like she would definitely like that as well, though I do feel like Cochran is the type of character that I feel like she gels with a bit more. So again, I went with Cochran in this spot. Next up for One World, and One World I think is a bit of a tough one, as I don't really see anyone here that she's like going to be such a massive fan of. Tarzan was kind of this wacky character that I could see her kind of gelling with, considering who she likes from future seasons, though did not go with him. Troyzan was at least an underdog, or maybe she would like that, though at the end of the day, again, Troyzan, again, does come off a bit chauvinistic at points where I don't think she would really gel with that. And Bill, someone that obviously faced off against some very blatant racism against him. I think he would at least be in consideration, though I did not pick him. Person I picked here ends up being Sabrina. Again, I just feel like Sabrina is like the type of person that I could see her very much gelling with. I think she came off as a fun personality early on. I think she also has, again, a bit of a backstory that I think Sia would like, of her being a teacher for the underprivileged. So where, again, I think those are things I think she can kind of gel with here with Sabrina. So I feel like that would probably be her pick here. Next up for Philippines. And Philippines is an interesting one here, as I'm kind of going to go against who I think she would typically pick. As again, I think when looking at the people on the board, I think Lisa is someone that has this big journey across the season. I could see her very much liking Lisa, though considering she's like a former child actress and, again, potentially has money, I don't know if she would necessarily go that route. Penner is someone that I think she would actually like Penner on this season. I feel like this is kind of the point where she might turn around on Penner, though I did not go with him. Person I picked here ends up being Malcolm. And again, Malcolm was just a big fan favorite at this point. Obviously, like, Lisa wins the fan favorite vote by the end, but again, still Malcolm was this you should have won guy, the guy that barely misses out by the end. I feel like that's, again, another thing that she kind of likes. Where I think the one qualm would be his archetype, though I still feel like, again, he was a pretty big underdog throughout a lot of the season. Again, originally on Matt Singh, and then towards the end game, he had the Windows comps. And with him, again, coming just so close to the win, I feel like he is the person that she would pick here. Next up for Karen Moen. I think Karen Moen's a little bit interesting here as well, where I think there's a few people to consider. Again, I think Dawn is someone that, again, has a very sympathetic background. I feel like that is someone that, again, I could see her potentially going with, though I think the fact that she was portrayed in a bit more villainous of a light towards the end, especially in her dynamic with Brenda, I feel like it's something that might not get her the money by the end here. I also considered Eric, where I could see her being very sympathetic towards Eric and him being medevac at the very end, though again, he was kind of a non-factor for most of the season where I did not pick him. Brenda is someone I did consider here, as again, she got a very sympathetic edit in her final episode. Again, she was number 2 in the fan favorite vote somehow, to where, again, I would at least consider her, to not pick her. Person I did pick here, though, ends up being Malcolm once again. And again, this one's a little bit more rocky, especially considering Malcolm's taken out a bit earlier in the game, though I think the momentum from Philippines kind of carries over here. Again, he was still this massive underdog towards the end of his run, pulls off some very bold moves that I think she would very much respect, to where, again, I think she would pick Malcolm here. Next up for Blood vs. Water, and I feel like this is actually a pretty tough one. I feel like this is one where I do have a couple people I think she would deeply consider. First up, I would consider Monica Culpepper. Monica's very good at competitions. I feel like, again, the stronger woman figure on the show. I think someone that, again, can't be looked at as an inspiration by the end. Sia would like. I think the question mark here is obviously Monica is probably well off. Again, she's married to an ex-NFL player and a current lawyer, where, again, I don't think she's struggling for the money,
which is obviously the main reason why I didn't end up picking her here. Also, they consider Tina.
Tina's someone that comes very close to the win, has this pretty big underdog run on Redemption Island, to where, again, I think she would like Tina. Now, again, Tina's won before, and I don't think she's needing the money, to where I feel like that could also play a factor here, though also considering the fact that Tina tragically lost her son at the time of the finale, I think is something that could play a factor here as well, though, again, I did not side with Tina in this spot. Considered Hayden. I mean, Hayden is the person I think would have probably won the actual fan favorite award had it actually happened here, and I could see her liking him here as well.
I just feel like this is another person that, again, she's more likely to pick.
Also, very much considered Laura. I feel like Laura is someone that wins a lot of challenges on Redemption Island. Again, has this underdog run. Again, this older woman that comes off as a badass. I feel like these are the type of things she likes. Though, again, I did not pick her. Also considered Vetus. Now, Vetus is a bit of an interesting one where obviously he is a bit more of a villain on the show. I think he definitely gets tainted in a bit of a negative light, though. He is also someone that has this big redemption story, talking about how he used to be an addict and went to jail and then has come on the other side. And I feel like she could be very sympathetic towards that, though, again, I did not pick him.
The person I did end up picking here ends up being Sierra. And Sierra is obviously somebody that by the end of the season was definitely a fan favorite. And she's obviously someone that, again, like, had a lot going for her from a game perspective. Obviously, she votes out her mom. She also obviously ends up being the rock draw as this big underdog by the end, where, again, I think there's a lot to credit Sierra there, but also, again, from a Sia perspective, assumedly needs the money more than most of the other people on this cast, where, again, she's a single mother. So while, again, I'm pretty sure she's from a pretty well-off family, again, I feel like Sierra would be someone that, again, needs the money more than, again, Monica, Tina, Hayden, or Laura, all of which were pretty well off, to where, again, I do feel like because of that, I think she would pick Sierra in this spot.
Next up for Cagayan, and for Cagayan here, I don't really have that solid of an answer, realistically. I could see her picking Wu. I feel like Wu's type of person I could see her liking, and someone that was this fun character at points. Also, again, played this more like honor-bound game. Again, someone that came off like very genuine in how he was portrayed on the show, to where, again, I think she could like that. I did not pick him, though. Also considered Spencer, where obviously Spencer was the fan favorite of the season. People loved Spencer at the time. He almost wins the season. Though, again, I did not pick him. Person I did pick here, though, I did pick Tasha. And again, I think it would be between Tasha and Spencer. And obviously Spencer gets closer to winning here, though I think she is someone that would gel a bit more Tasha. I mean, Tasha is someone that, again, I think came off as like, again, strong female player early on, but also has this like good underdog run towards the end, wins a lot of challenges. So again, I think Tasha comes off very well in Cagayan, where, again, I feel like Sia would side towards Tasha over Spencer. Next up for San Juan del Sur, and this one's obvious. We know the answer to this. I mean, Sia herself has said this. And to be fair, it's for a later season, but I do think she would very clearly pick Keith. Again, she literally said at the time of Ko Wrong, when she first gave out her first award to Tai, that she wanted to do this the previous year, again, implying Cambodia, which we'll get to, that she wanted to give the money to Keith. They got nervous and didn't do it by the end, but again, I think this is a spot where clearly she would pick Keith. I think she loves Keith. This is the type of character she likes. Again, this good old boy, again, wacky-ish character, had an underdog run, won some challenges. Again, I feel like this is the type of person she likes. I think at the end of the day, I think Keith is the pretty easy pick. Next for Worlds Apart, and I mean, this one we do have some precedent on who she would pick, but it's not a good pick. But either way, I mean, obviously, again, Mike has a big underdog run, but he won, so I don't think she would pick him. Carolyn also, I think, kind of fits into this mold that she would typically like. Again, this older woman, wins challenges, aggressive player, though, again, I did not pick her. The person I did pick here ends up being Joe. And again, as I mentioned before, I think there is some hesitancy archetype-wise if she would like Joe, though she gave Joe money in Edge of Extinction in a season that he barely had anything to do. So it's like, I feel like she likes Joe. And again, while she wouldn't have picked Joe in Cambodia, as we'll talk about, I do think she would pick Joe in a season like this. So again, none of these other people are really popping to me, considering, again, we know that she literally did give money to Joe later on in the show's history. I do think his first appearance here, and one that, again, he comes off as this big underdog in the show, very likable his first time around. I think Joe is the pick here. Next up for Cambodia, and again, I said the answer. We know the answer. It is Keith. Yet she's literally said it herself that she was going to give the money to Keith, but chickened out. So literally said she's going to pick Keith here. So again, I'll take her at her word. Obviously, we're skipping Ko Wrong, considering that was the first season she ever gave an award to, but she did not give an award for the next 3 seasons. So we're going to move on to Millennium Gen X. And this one, I don't think there's like a super solid answer. I think there's a few people to consider here. You got someone like Hannah, who I think should be sympathetic towards, with her like having panic attacks while on the show, though did not pick her. Also consider David, who obviously has this big journey across the season, is the like you should have won guy. So again, I very much considered him, though I did not go with him by the end. Also, obviously got to talk about Zeke, who also I think she would very much like, to where considered him, did not pick him here. Person I did pick here, though, is actually Jay. And again, I think this is close between Jay and David. I feel like it'll be between the two. And I think it's coming from two different types of players that Sia seems to like, where again, David would fit more into this like journey sort of person, who grows throughout the experience and that she would enjoy that. Though, again, I just get the vibe that she would like someone like Jay. Again, I think Jay, while, again, archetype-wise, again, you could say is more of like the Malcolm, the Ozzy. I think Jay also comes off very fun-loving on this season. And again, is this big underdog, has this like really fun exit of the fake idol situation, and in general, I think gives off a very similar vibe to someone like a Davey, who she does pick in a future season in terms of personality type, to where, again, I think Jay would be my pick here. Though, again, I can definitely see the argument for it being David instead. Next up for game changers. In this one, again, there's a few considerations. I mean, Cirie is someone to consider. Again, I think she would probably like Cirie. Obviously, Cirie gets kind of screwed by the end, or maybe should pick Cirie. Did not pick her though. But again, the main considerations for me were the person I picked or Zeke. And I think Zeke is someone that obviously like got a lot of sympathy coming out of this season. Obviously, the entire Varner situation was, and obviously most people end up siding with Zeke in that. I could see her being very sympathetic towards Zeke, wanting to give the money to Zeke by the end. Though again, I feel like we have more proof about Ty. So again, I went with Ty. Again, we know she loves Ty. It's the first time around. He also, again, once again, comes very close to winning. Just taking out the vote right before the end. And based on, like, what we know, I do feel like I would lean towards Ty getting the nod here, though I could see a world where she does give it to Zeke as well. Next up for HHH. I think this one's a bit tough because I actually do think the number one contender here is Ben. I do think she would sympathize with Ben, his struggles with PTSD, and him being this big underdog throughout the run, where, again, I think on most seasons, Ben would be the very easy pick. However, he won. So, again, I think that kind of nullifies him in this spot, unless she wanted to give him the money to give it away to charity, which, again, is fully possible. But outside that, again, I consider someone like Chrissy, again, this more aggressive player, wins challenges, older woman. Again, I feel like she likes that archetype, but at the same time, I do feel like Chrissy does come off very villainous, to where I feel like she would not necessarily pick her. Also consider Devin Pinto, where, again, I could see her liking Devin Pinto, who does come off largely likable across the season, but again, not to any extreme to where I did not pick him. Person I did pick here, though, ends up being Lauren Rimmer. And again, I think Lauren also falls into this kind of player that played the game aggressively, especially towards the end, kind of gets sniped out of the game. I think was a pretty big name at the time. I think everyone at the time thought Lauren Rimmer was just like guaranteed returnee. And while obviously that's faded over time, I think Lauren Rimmer was a pretty big name at that point, to where, again, I could very much see Lauren Rimmer falling into like the Elaine category of this person that she just really gels with from a personality standpoint and wants to give her the money. So again, I went with Lauren here. Now, again, we're going to be skipping 4 seasons here, but let's move on to Winners at War, where obviously she's never going to give money away on Winners at War. Why would she do this? But again, if she were to give away money to somebody, who would she pick? Again, I could see her still being sympathetic towards Ben. I do feel like Ben, well, again, obviously a lot of the online community does not like Ben. I do feel like Ben still comes off pretty sympathetic at points on this season. I mean, obviously, yeah, he quits at the end, but I still feel like, again, his quit is still like based around his own Survivor journey. And I feel like you do feel that if you're not someone that's just very anti-Ben just inherently. But I think you could see how much he struggles across the season with knowing how he's perceived from many of his fellow players. And also, Jeremy has a good underdog run. I feel like she would like Jeremy. Again, did not pick him though. But really, again, I feel like the easy answer here is Natalie. Again, Natalie had this big underdog run on Edge of Extinction, comes back at the very end, gets to the final 2, again, gets all the fire tokens while on the edge, does really well all the challenges. Again, I feel like this is kind of the person that she would very much gel with. So again, I think kind of an easy pick there. Next up for 41, and 41's a bit of a tough one, as, I mean, really, if she wanted to give someone money from 41, I feel like she probably would have, as she literally gives away money for the next 4 seasons, so again, I get the sense that she probably didn't like 41 that much, but again, we'll still talk about it. Considerations, Xander. Xander was fan favorite. Again, Xander was clearly the fan favorite during this time. I don't think Xander, someone that I see her really gelling with, where I don't think she would pick him, but again, at least someone to consider. I would also consider Ricard. I feel like Ricard obviously has a very unique backstory on this season. I mean, married to a trans man, having a kid very soon, also is partially deaf. Also, again, is the, like, you should have won guy who gets taken out before the end. Again, I think there's a lot of reason why she would potentially pick Ricard, though I did not go that route. I also consider Danny, who also gets a lot of sympathetic content before he goes, where he gets the segment about his father and his passing, and guess it's a great one with him winning the challenge on his birthday, where, again, I think that's all really good content, but again, I don't think it's enough to pick him. Also considered Evie. I think Evie's just, again, kind of the scrappy underdog figure that Sia would potentially like, though I did not pick them either. Person I did pick here, I did pick Shan. And again, it's simply because really we get a similar pick to Shan in the following season of, again, this very like aggressive, domineering figure, again, gets advantages, plays super hard. I think at the end of the day, again, I feel like Shan is kind of the person that she would gel with the most here. So again, I went with Shan. And again, skipping over the next few seasons, 46 though, I think is interesting, as I think there's actually like a good chunk of contenders here for 46. Now, again, I'll consider Charlie. Again, Charlie obviously is this like you should have won guy. I think the qualm here is that, again, I don't really get the sense that like Charlie's necessarily her ideal archetype, so again, I did not go with him. I also considered Maria. I mean, Maria's also this, like, you should have won person who gets screwed over because of how Final Challenge went out. So we're mixing out the fact that, again, she's this older woman, this person that did well in challenges. Again, I could see Maria definitely being in her archetype, though I did not pick her. Tiffany, again, someone in that, like, Shandrea sort of archetype. So again, this big, aggressive player, taken out mid-game. I could see her liking Tiffany as well, did not pick her. Hunter, also, I could kind of see her liking and being this person who was good at the survival aspects of the show. I also considered Tevin. I could see Tevin being like a personality that she really gels with, though, again, I don't think was a big enough presence across the season to pick him. Also, I considered Banu. I mean, obviously, I think Banu's who people were kind of expecting her to give the money to, but I did not pick him. The person I did pick Ben. And again, I think Ben is the type of person I think Sia would very much sympathize with by the end. Obviously, again, him having these constant panic attacks that got very highlighted on the show. I think that is something she would very much sympathize with. Also, again, the fact that he is a musician as well, I feel like there'll be like some camaraderie there as well. Though again, I think Ben is someone that I could definitely see her giving the prize to in this spot. Now for Survivor 47, where I feel like there's a pretty obvious answer here. Now, again, I would consider someone like Atini, who obviously talks about their experiences being non-binary, and I think they were clearly meant to be mostly likable on the season, where, again, I think that would be consideration. I would also consider someone like Genevieve, who has a bit of an arc and was this big player. I would also consider Andy, who obviously similar thing, massive arc across the season, major character. Now, major consideration was Saul, simply by the fact that obviously, again, people seem to love Saul, obviously, especially in that Saul-Rome dynamic, and Saul was, again, the fan favorite by the time he left, though I do think, and there's a certain person that has a bit more of a story for Sia's pick here. There's an obvious answer here, and that person is Kyle. And again, I think there's some reservations in the sense that, like, Kyle is, again, kind of more in line of like someone like a Joe initially, in terms of like this big challenge beast, which isn't necessarily the person that Sia would always give their money to, though, considering the fact that he's also someone that, again, very openly was struggling with money and was talked about as this big family man. I feel like there is also that like Donathan aspect of him as well, where I think mixing those two things together, I feel like Kyle's kind of this perfect package, where I would feel like Sia would definitely easily hand the award to him. And again, there we go. I mean, that is every season of Survivor US, who I think Sia would give money to from every season. Now down the road again, I'll probably do similar-ish videos to this about certain other topics, so stay tuned for those down the road. But for now, that is the video. Thank you for watching.